we look forward to any opportunity to share our story. And one of the things, especially with groups like yours, that I like to share up front, we do not believe that we are the first people in the world to be doing this work. We know that there are tons of people throughout the state, throughout the nation, that have been doing this work far longer than us. And what we try to do is learn from other people and use that information to improve what we're doing. So none of the projects we're doing, well, maybe a few of the projects are first of their kind. But when it comes to veg management, we're following other people's examples. And what I think is novel about the MWPA is the fact that we are a joint powers authority that only has one responsibility, and that's wildfire prevention. And then the other thing is that we're well funded. And I'll be honest, we have a $20 million a year budget. And I know a lot of people would kill for a $20 million a year budget that can only be used for wildfire prevention. It can't be used for anything else. And so with no further ado, I'll go ahead and start my screen share. And even though we tested it, I'll look for a quick thumbs up from you guys to actually, I can't even. Looks good, because I can't see the screen or see the images anymore. So, all right. So, Denise already started the introduction for me, but I did have the opportunity to serve on a CAL FIRE incident management team for 15 years, which I served as the operations section chief and had numerous assignments that taught me a lot. And some of those assignments include the Thomas Fire down in Ventura and Santa Barbara during Christmas time of 17. I was the ops section chief for the first 5 days of the campfire and moved into deputy IC role. In 2017, I was the incident commander for the Nuns Fire for the first 24 hours. And so a lot of experience, and it just became clear to me that it was time to transition my career from suppression to prevention. And I used the Thomas Fire as one of the examples of what was really eye-opening for me. Montecito Fire Protection District had a great relationship with their public. They had great defensible space. They had a great relationship with the Los Padres National Forest with shaded fuel breaks. And we had a large volume of fire sitting above Montecito just before a sundowner event. And we did a lot of prep work. We found that our efficiency was increased 4 to 1 based on the work that had already been done. Normally, where I would put 4 strike teams of crews, we would only have to put 1 strike team of crews in there. And when the sundowner event did come and the fire came off the hill down into Montecito, 1,300 homes were impacted and 12 structures were destroyed. Now, it's not great that 12 structures were destroyed, but the ratio of 1,300 homes to 12, I think, is a fantastic number, and it really opened my eyes to the importance of fire prevention. So I'll give a little bit about background and history. This is our standard slide deck, but I hid a bunch of the slides that gives a lot of the why and of as far as understanding the difference, the new wildfire paradigm that we're in, because I don't need to explain that to you guys. And then we have talk about building the MWPA, what we're doing, where we're going, and at the very end of it, I'll have some challenges that we've come about. This will be, I think, my only slide on the paradigm change, and that is, we know it's happened, and this is an image from the Rocky Fire, where I actually served as a branch director on the Rocky Fire, and it was the roundest big fire I've ever been on. And I say that because it means that the fire grew in all directions, and it really wasn't driven by a strong wind event or weather event. The fuels were such that it just burned in all directions. So, and something that I've been taught that I continue to preach is, if you want to predict the future in wildfire, you look at the past. And this is the fire history in Marin. We've been fortunate and haven't been tremendously impacted in the last few decades. But we all talk about, a lot of people talk about the Hanley Fire and the Nuns Fire. The Hanley Fire and the Nuns had, not the Nuns, the Tubbs, had virtually identical footprints. But the difference is the footprint of the Hanley took 2.5 days to fill, whereas the footprint of the Nuns fire was, or excuse me, the Tubbs. I keep saying the Nuns. I'm sorry. The Nuns was happened to be in my hometown, so it kind of sticks in my head. But the footprint of the Tubbs fire took 6 hours. So we're talking 2.5 days versus 6 hours. And then what's also not well known is that the Hanley fire in 1964 was actually the second time that fire burned. And this fire, the largest fire in Marin's history that I'm outlining right here, that happened the same night as the first Hanley fire. And so if it happened before, if it happened in 1923, it's likely to happen again. We just, in 2017, we got lucky. We didn't have the ignitions that other counties had. If we had the ignitions, we would have had the same problems. We in Marin, we're a small county with smaller agencies. It's hard to say that we have any large agencies at all when our largest fire departments have 7 stations. So they're not very big at all. And we've had to learn to respond to incidents without jurisdictional boundaries, and we do it very well. However, our wildfire prevention did not do as well across jurisdictional boundaries. We were very constrained by the jurisdictional boundaries. We invited all of the land management, fire, and law enforcement agencies that were involved in the North Bay fires down in Marin. We asked them, what were you doing before the fire, during the fire, after the fires? What worked well for you? And what were your challenges? And we came up with 6 pages of action items. And when I say 6 pages, they're single line action items, not big old action items. And what became very clear was that there was no agency, no discipline within public safety or jurisdiction that was in charge of making sure all of these action items occurred. And more importantly, there was no funding for that. Other public government or other government budgets would have had to have been cut in order for us to put money towards working towards those action items. And then we had a very supportive report from our civil grand jury that went along with the lessons learned in their support for a joint powers authority. And actually they recommend a sales tax. So we pulled both a sales tax and a property tax. The property tax pulled higher, and it's a square footage property tax. So it's very stable. It's based on the square footage of the building space. And we feel that it pulled better is because the larger the building, the more effort it takes to defend that building from a wildfire. So I think that's why it helped push it over past the finish line for us. We also had some super strong pre-existing relationships in Marin. And like I said, Marin County is not that big of a county, and our smaller agencies isn't just the fire agencies that are small, but it's also our public works, our planning departments, our law enforcement. So our agencies have gotten used to having to work with each other to solve any of our bigger sized problems. So I think that trend to work together so well before Measure C and the creation of the MWPA helped us get everybody to agree on what we were doing. And then we have Fire Safe Marin. I think you guys and Fire Safe Marin are the first two to happen in the nation. And so both of you have excellent track records, and Fire Safe Marin had such a strong voice in Marin, and the public was already geared to listen to them. We decided that we would use them as our public education arm rather than having the MWPA try to replace Fire Safe Marin for public education and awareness. We just continue to fund them and work with them side by side with our messaging. And in my opinion, it's working quite well. So one of the first questions was, who would be part of this JPA? And basically the price of admission is if you have taxing and fire authority within your jurisdiction, then you were invited to be a part of the MWPA. There's 19 such entities in Marin that have taxing and fire authority. 17 of them decided to join. And we had to have a go, no-go type decision. What agencies are a must-have and what agencies were, all right, if they don't join, then we can live without that. And so Everybody in Marin joined except for the Tiburon Peninsula, which is Tiburon Fire Protection District and the city of Belvedere. They felt they had the resources to continue their efforts in a way that they needed to. And then which non-members needed to be consulted, and Fire Safe Marin is one of those non-members. And we also have in Marin, and I think this may be true for San Mateo, please let me know if I'm wrong, a very high percentage of publicly owned lands, whether it's federal lands, state parks and national parks, local land management agencies. And so we created a means for those land management agencies to be non-voting members within our advisory technical committee, which I'll get into. Real quick, like I said, 17 of the 19 member agencies chose to join. We're funded by 10 cents per square foot parcel tax. So that means we're very, very stable. The building envelopes within a community don't change all that much. They definitely don't go down unless you have a large devastating fire, which is exactly our mission to prevent. And we're a slow growth county, so we don't have that much growth. So it's pretty easy to predict our revenue. We did pass Measure C about 2 weeks before the shutdown of COVID. I'm fairly convinced had that timing been reversed, it probably would not have passed. And I think that the parcel tax is far more stable than a sales tax would have been, especially in that first year of the COVID shutdown. So building and setting up the MWPA. Well, first we started with our Community Wildfire Protection Plan. It was a revision of our 2016 plan. We used high resolution LiDAR data to work out on our fine fuels map. We use that fine fuels map combined with weather data, combined with previous fire histories to come up with a parcel level risk assessment, which helps us prioritize where we're doing our work. And then we had a very substantial work plan built into the CWPP. So we're really using that as our guiding force to what work we're getting done. And then I see the MWPA as being a convener. And so we really try to bring together these groups, our land managers. Again, we have a very large percentage of our land is owned by the land management agency. So it's important that we work with them side by side to improve their forest health, to make our residents safe. And then the residents, and this is probably a big part of your guys' mission, and that is to help the residents understand their obligation, their responsibilities in the wildfire prevention picture. It's not just waiting for government entities to come and make them safe. We have our civic leaders, which are both elected, appointed, but we also have our leaders at large within our communities that we're connecting with to help spread our message, but also get the work done. Obviously, first responders are a key component. And then private businesses, whether it's businesses helping us develop our Defensible Space app, which I'll talk a little bit about, to work partner on our grants program. Almost all of our work is being conducted by private contractors. And then we have any development that's going on that we'll work side by side with our developers to make sure that they're following fire safe practices. I'll let you read our vision statement, but it really is to create fire adapted communities and understanding that wildfire is a natural part of our environment. And we will not remove fire from our environment. That's impossible, nor should we even try. It's an important part of our ecology. But what we want to do is limit the loss of life and damage, and at the same time protect our environment from the work that we're doing, because sometimes some of our fire prevention work, if it's not done properly, can do more damage to the environment than a fire would have. We've created a strategic plan that has 5 goal areas. I'm going to actually work out from the middle of this slide and work out, and that's because we've taken a strategy that we're calling a house out approach. A lot of the residents want to stand at their house and look at the wildlands and say the wildlands are the problem. That's what's threatening our homes, rather than turn around and looking at their houses and realizing, wait a minute, if I harden my home and make my home less ignitable, if I do fire smart landscaping and make my landscaping less ignitable without clearscaping, then my home is much more resilient to fire. So we're really focusing on that house out approach. The biggest part of it is our defensible space evaluations, where we strive to do 1/3 of our residences annually. We're actually exceeding that. And then we are improving our evacuation systems and routes. We fund the implementation of Zone Haven in Marin, except for Tiburon and Belvedere. We're also working on other notification improvements. We help with our camera system, looking at when we'll apply any artificial intelligence for fire detection. And then we have been doing a lot of work on our evacuation corridors. And I will talk about a little bit later our evacuation ingress egress risk assessment. And then we're doing veg management, whether it is within our communities, like in public parks, or right along the wildland urban interface boundary. And then Fire Safe Marin is our public education arm, like I said, and we're funding them close to $1 million a year for public education. And then we have our low income seniors tax exemption, and then a really right now a successful and growing resident grant program, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. Here's how we're built. And I really do feel that we're a ground up organization. We do have our 17-member board, which is always fun to deal with 17 bosses. So to help with that, we have an executive committee of 5 members, a finance committee of 7 members. But here's where I want to dig into is the operations committee and the advisory technical committee. The operations committee is 17 members. It's populated by our fire chiefs and our city managers. And so we get both the fire expertise in operations and public management expertise. They're the ones who set our strategy for each work plan. And like I said, it's been the house out approach. And then since we've started, and we think we'll be staying in the house out approach for quite some time, then they push that strategy down to the advisory technical committee. And that's, again, 17 members, each from one person from each of our member agencies. And these are our pre-fire engineers. These are our fire captains, our battalion chiefs, that are the people that are designing the projects. So they take the strategy from the operations committee, create projects that are in alignment with that strategy. My staff and I work with them to bundle that up into a package. We work with the operations committee to create the core budget. They prioritize and organize it and send it up to the board of directors for approval so we can implement. And here's where our 17-member agencies, we've taken them from 17 different entities and grouped them into 5 geographical zones. And these zones really do reflect the different types of fire behavior, demographics, the way the communities were built. And because one size doesn't fit all. Nevada Fire Protection District is a newer community than, let's say, Mill Valley. It is more grassy oak woodland, not as steep. The roads are newer, so they're wider compared to Mill Valley, very steep hills, heavy timber, and roads that were built in 1906. So they were really designed around a Model A rather than our contemporary cars. So that allows us to create projects that fit the zone rather than just having a one-size-fits-all approach. 60% of our budget is what we call our core budget, and that extends across all of our zones: veg management, grants, public education, fire detection, evacuation route improvements. Then 20% of our budget, so over $4 million a year, goes towards defensible space evaluations and home hardening. And our tax is a 10-year tax. I think at the end of 10 years, we will say our single biggest success was our defensible space evaluation program. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And then 20% goes right back to our member agencies for them to use for how they see fit for wildfire prevention. But it has to have added on to what they were doing prior to Measure C. And I like to use the Mill Valley as an example. They'd always had $300,000 a year set aside for wildfire prevention. Well, they have to continue to have $300,000 from their city budget on top of the proceeds that they're using from Measure C. So we increased work rather than replaced work. And then environmental compliance has been huge. It started before the MWPA even existed. We created a partnership with our environmental stakeholders called Ecologically Sound Practices. And they really help us guide the creation of our best management practices. but we've also brought on Panorama, who's been phenomenal with our environmental work. In the first year, Panorama completed about 27 notices of exemption for us. And then we have gone through one project-specific analysis in the Cal VTP, and we are on target to approve our second project-specific analysis in April. And then we've been working hard to get a better return on investment of our taxpayers' dollar by going out and getting our own grants. And so by being a regional entity that can already provide funding towards projects, it really does make us an attractive target for agencies that wish to provide grants. So implementing our work plan, I talked about our house out approach a lot already, so I'm going to really just skip over this slide. But how we're doing it is that last year we had 33,800 and change inspections throughout our jurisdiction, and we have about 70,000 residences. So we are doing that 1/3. And what's really good is that 60% of the people who received an inspection took some form of action. They didn't do everything that we're asking them to do, but at least 60% took action. And we think that's an awesome stat, but we want to increase that number. It's directly connected to our home evaluation program. In their report, they can see which findings are grant eligible. As of the end of the year, we were of 2022, we were at 460,000 of in grants awarded. We're actually closer to 60,000 or 600,000 in this current fiscal year that we've awarded. Of the people who have applied for grants, we're seeing that they're spending twice as much as we're giving them. But what we haven't captured yet, and we're going to work with our DSpace app developer to start capturing this work, is how much money are the residents putting in who didn't ask for grants. And so I think through our inspection program, we're actually getting close to $5 million worth of work a year being performed on private properties. Some of the features that we look to do for our grant program is one of our guys calls this the make the problem go away button. For those that have the financial resources to just say, hey, make this as easy as possible for me to get my vents, make it as easy as possible for me to get my gutter guards or get the fire smart landscaping. We're going to create a relationship with our contractors. They push a button, they can automatically get quotes for that work. And then a beta test that we're going to look at is have a contractor that solely does vents. And once they get enough people requesting vents within a small location, and they can send one crew to do several houses in 1 day or 2 days, creates huge cost savings for the contractors that we'll be able to get 50% discounts for that work. So we're entering into that type of agreement here soon. The problem with our grant program is that it's a reimbursement grant program, and a lot of people are property rich, money poor, and they don't have the financial resources to get the work done. So we want to be able to put a contractor on their property with their permission and pay that contractor directly if they meet the access and functional needs requirements of Cal OES. And then there's the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. I'm sure you've all heard of Wildfire Prepared at Home program. And what we wanted to avoid was having our residents have to have yet another inspection that they have to pay $125 for after they're already paying for the Measure C tax. So we reached out to IBHS, and we're in a beta test now where they can accept our reports with the property owner's permission, and then designate that home as a wildfire prepared home without the IBHS having to send their inspectors out. And we feel that that's how all the insurance companies are going to adhere to the Safer from Wildfire law in California. We don't think they're going to create their own programs. They'll just use IBHS's program. Chipper Days has been a huge success. We put about $1.25 million a year towards Chipper Days. We align it with our DSpace evaluation program. And again, it's a direct link with when a resident gets their report, they can sign up for the Chipper Day that aligns with their community, and they can time their work, and they leave a pile out on the street, and we come by and pick up their debris. And that's 10,000 plus yards a year being removed. So put it this way, over 1,000 dump trucks hauling debris away each year. And then our pub ed program, like I was talking about, the bottom left of the screen is my favorite form of public education, and that is our defensible space evaluations, where our evaluators are talking to the residents face to face. That's where we're getting the most public education. But we have webinars, community meetings, and then we hosted Ember Stomp last year, which was a wildfire festival. We brought pub ed and vendors together to one site. We thought we'd get 500 to 600 people. We had 2,000. So we're scaling up Ember Stomp even more for next year. Evacuation route clearing. This is the same road. You can see the difference between before and after. Zone Haven, you guys are very well aware of Zone Haven, so I won't dig into Zone Haven. And then here's our evacuation ingress egress risk assessment. We are evaluating every evacuation route within the MWPA's jurisdiction. We are looking at the fire threat. We are looking at what type of road is it, what are the demographics of the community, how many cars can that road handle, are there parking issues, are there traffic control issues, pinch points. We're looking at our communications network. How well can our messages to evacuate get to our residents? And then we're looking at human behavior. So the data that is coming out of this is just phenomenal, and it's really opening our eyes on the different things we can do in order to get people out of harm's way faster. And we believe no one's ever done this type of survey, this type of assessment before. Of course, we're using a lot of prescribed herbivory, combination of goats, sheep, and cattle, using the right animal for the right project. Shaded fuel breaks. And there's a lot of people that say, well, why shaded fuel breaks? And if the Tubbs fire jumped a 6-lane freeway, what makes you think a 100 to 300 foot shaded fuel break is going to work? Well, this is better described as 100 to 300 feet of defensible space along the wildland urban interface boundary. We want the shade so that we can keep the temperatures down on the ground fuels, keep the moisture up, decrease the probability of ignition, so that when a wildfire approaches this shaded fuel break and the embers are landing in the shaded fuel break, instead of igniting new and extreme spot fires close to residences that can throw embers up against the residences, they'll smolder or have low intensity fires closer to the structures. And then as the main fire approaches the shaded fuel break, it will decrease the rates of spread and decrease the intensities. And that's for the mega fires or the extreme fires. For the average run-of-the-mill 3-acre fire that can hit a home faster than a fire engine can get to it, we feel that these shaded fuel breaks right up on the wildland urban interface boundary will allow those homes to survive without suppression actions. So our first one is the Greater Ross Valley shaded fuel break, 38 miles long. We are 1 year in implementing that now. We've expended close to $2 million already on this project, and we did receive a $3.25 billion grant to fund it. And we were able to use modeling to hit the priority areas first and then work all the way around this. We see this as an everlasting project, though. Once we create a fuel break, it becomes part of our infrastructure that we have to maintain. We also are in the planning process now for the Greater Novato shaded fuel break, which is 60 miles of that 100 to 300 foot defensible space along the wildland urban interface boundary. This is where we are looking to get our project specific analysis approved in April. We approved the Greater Ross Valleys last year in June, and we will be applying for a CAL FIRE grant for this project. And again, we are applying for many grants over and over. And maybe it's an unrealistic goal, but my goal is that for every dollar the residents put into the MWPA, we find another dollar of grant money. So our challenges, it's been biggest challenge was creating the bandwidth to accomplish our mission, both within the MWPA and within our member agencies. I constantly say, and I will continue to say this, the strength of the MWPA is because of the strength of our member agencies. We have some phenomenal people working for us. Todd Lando is an example. The Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break is Todd Lando's vision, and he was able to put that together. The way we are doing our defensible space evaluations and the app that we created, Todd Lando and others have put their heads together and created that system. But with the funding that we were providing our member agencies, without them increasing staff, it's extremely hard for them to implement these projects. So we've been behind a little bit on the power curve to create the bandwidth within the MWPA and then within our member agencies. For example, I was the only employee for 8 months of the MWPA and having to work with each of our member agencies. We now have 7 employees, and it still isn't enough, to be honest with you. But our member agencies are ramping up their bandwidth, so we are getting over that hurdle. And then focusing our energies where they belong. Are we putting money in the right places at the right time? And I'll use our grant program. We've spread our grant program evenly across the jurisdiction. But you can argue that perhaps we are not spending enough in our high risk zones because we're spending a lot in some of our lower risk zones. And quite frankly, some of the projects are home improvement and modification projects that they were going to do anyway. So we're going to look at a prioritization process and really hit the high priority items so that we can make sure that we're putting our energies where they should. Building trust has been huge. Environmental stakeholders, building that trust has been huge. We're 80 to 90% there. We still have some environmental stakeholders that are very suspicious of our actions, and they're constantly looking over our shoulders and looking for places where we've made mistakes. Fortunately, we have been able to show them that we haven't made any mistakes yet. I won't say we won't. But all the instances where they think they found something, it hasn't been anything, to be honest with you. And then we have our taxpayer oversight groups that don't trust any government entity and think we're just creating a bloated bureaucracy to employ more people like me, and that don't actually get work done. So with our work productivity, we're starting to earn that trust, and we are being beyond transparent. I mean, I'm a biased opinion on this, but the MWPA is the most transparent government entity I've ever seen, and we continue to strive with that. And then we have to build the trust of our member agencies. You know, there is a little bit of, well, why is Southern Marin not getting as much money as Novato? Why isn't West Marin getting as much money as this? So we're still creating those relationships to get everybody to trust each other and pull the rope in the same way. And then measures of success. When you're trying to prevent something, and if something doesn't happen, how do you say that you were successful? Was it just luck that it didn't happen, or was it our work? So, and then, and I know we've got a bunch of CAL FIRE folks in here, but I'm not a big fan of the agreement with CAL FIRE and U.S. Forest Service saying that we will have prescribed fire over 500,000 acres every year. Well, what kind of acres are they? Are they high risk acres or are they low risk acres? I don't think acreage is a great metric. I don't think miles of evacuation route is a great metric. We can clear 15 miles of Nicastro Valley Road along the Nicastro Valley Reservoir really easy and get a great stat. But did we really do anything to increase the safety of the community? So we're using the evacuation ingress egress risk assessment that will prioritize all of our evacuation routes for their danger. And then as we do our projects, it'll reevaluate those and show that we've decreased the risk on those evacuation routes. And then we have a phenomenal project going on right now with a company called Willow Labs. They've taken the damage assessment data, they've taken the data from IBHS's testing, UL Labs testing, and quantified what creates home ignitions, both in the home hardening environment and the fire safe environment, or the fire smart landscaping environment. And then when we come back, so that data is provided by our defensible space application inspection program. Then when our inspectors come and re-inspect and we see that this house went from not having the right vents to having 1/8-inch vents, they put a Class A roof and they did fire smart landscaping, we can actually quantify the decrease in risk for that property. And then when we start looking at it as a community, we can quantify the decrease of risk for that community. So we're just finishing up our beta test on that. and launching that for the entire jurisdiction. And then that's going to allow us to establish our measures of success. We've been really taking that, creating our measures of success slowly to make sure that we actually hit the items that we really should be hitting. And I've been jabbering along for quite some time, so I'm going to stop my screen share and take any questions you may have.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. I think we're all in awe of the program of the authority. It sounds like Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority has created the absolutely perfect program. We do have a lot of questions. I know you're short on time. I'm just going to start off. Do you know approximately how much the cost was to bring Measure C to the voters? And then how was that funded?
So you talk about the campaign?
Yeah, and getting Measure C already and packaged to actually bring it to the voters.
That's a great question. And I don't have the financial answer to that. I do know that Marin County Fire put our veg management battalion chief solely on the mission of working with all the member agencies to create the JPA language. But when it came to campaigning for Measure C, it was all funded privately. It can't be used, government funds could not be used. But let me reach out to people who have that number and I can get it to you, Denise.
Okay, all right, great. So let's just go through the chat here because everybody has a lot of questions and I'm not sure if you can read the chat, but just to confirm, you're funding through your revenues on an annual basis, Fire Safe Marin, $1 million.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. So MJ from Portola Valley has a question. How does the authority fund the home inspection program? Are those fire departments doing those inspections, or do you have your own inspectors?
The original concept was that the MWPA would employ the inspectors. However, we had an opt-out clause for all the member agencies that it would simply become a pass-through where the money would come to the MWPA and we pass it through to the member agency. Everybody had to opt out the first year because we were not in a position to employ a bunch of inspectors. We had targeted the need for 60 inspectors in Marin County to do what we wanted to do. So right now, all of the member agencies do opt out and are providing the inspections themselves. However, we do have a consortium that's been created of our West Marin and our Central Marin agencies started it, and then Southern Marin is joining in, where Marin County Fire employs all of the inspectors. They do all the inspections through those 3 zones, and then Marin County Fire invoices the member agencies for that work. We, as the MWPA, receive tax funding from the county 3 times a year, December, April, and June. It's a 55%, 40%, 5% tax dump. So when we receive our revenue, then we send 20% of that revenue to each member agency in ratio to their population. And to make numbers easy, if you have 20% of the population, you get 20% of that 20%. If you have 5% of the population, you get 5% of the 20%. So Novato and San Rafael are doing their own inspection programs, but with the same strategic vision. And then the other 3 zones are in that consortium.
And how many inspectors are working right now?
About 54.
54. All right. All right. Our next question is from Sarah. Her question is, who's actually doing the fuels treatment work? Is it contractors? And are you using the Mount Tam crews at all?
So much of the work are through contractors, but absolutely we're using the TAM fire crews in quite a few locations. And then we've also created what we call the Fire Foundry. And that is a group or a program that's geared at our underutilized populations to create a sustainable career pathway into the fire service for them. So we're providing education so they can get their AS in fire science, their EMT. We're providing housing if needed. And then they work as a fuels crew on some of our veg management projects and also some of our direct assistance programs. And then MWPA is funding the work, but it's a partnership between Marin County Fire and Conservation Corps North Bay.
So do you have kind of a dollar amount of how much that hand crew work is actually costing you, like per day, or
We're averaging, don't quote me on this. This is a very, very, very rough number, but 8,000 or better a day per crew that we're using.
Okay. And Brian Kelly from our DEMS office has a question about how large of a role did the grand jury report play in getting this approved?
I think it was when it came to the residents feeling like this was a smart investment for them. I can't quantify it, but I do think having the backing of the grand jury saying, yes, a JPA needs to be formed, and yes, we need to tax ourselves. I do think it played a big role. Also, our partnership with our organization called Citizens, or it's COST is their acronym, but they're a taxpayer organization. We actually had their support. They said yes, vote on this tax. Wow. And then working side having the agreement of all of our environmental stakeholders, whether it was the Marin Conservation League, Sierra Club, all the different environmental groups all supported the initiative. That's what got us over the hurdle with the votes. And
I'm sure they're glad now that they did support it. It makes them look really great. Okay, Ed Mitchell from Belmont has a question about your defensible space inspection. So you stated that about 60% of residents are taking some sort of action after they receive an inspection. Did you consider this a high response? Do you consider that part of the, because of public education from FireSafe? Or why do you think you got that 60%?
I do. It's higher than I thought it was going to be. I'll be honest with you. That was a stat that surprised me when we were digging up on our metrics. I do think the public education aspect of it was key, but I think the evaluators or the inspectors walking on the properties with the residents is the number one goal key. And then there's the whole compliance piece. Should we have citations, the stick versus the carrot? And so far we've stayed away from the carrot, and we've been using we've stayed away from the stick. We've been using the carrot, and the biggest part of that carrot is public education. But what we have found is it's the re-inspections. The properties that we go and re-inspect is driving the compliance. When they know we're going to come back and look, that's when they're getting the work done. And then we've had a voluntary abatement program. There are abatement programs, but we find them to be cumbersome and take 18 months before we can get the work on a property, and then we have to put the tax lien on. We've had good success going to high risk properties that we feel that this one structure is the one that's going to burn down the rest of the community. We said, hey, we'll come in and we'll do the work for you. Sometimes we fund all of it. Sometimes we do a portion of the work. I'll use one house as an example. They had a shake roof and terrible veg management. We said, if you put a Class A roof on your house, we'll do the veg management. So they put a Class A roof on their house. We put veg management, and now we just protected the rest of that community.
Okay, yeah, I mean, and plus you have the chipper program. So when you go and do those inspections, you can say, hey, oh, and by the way, if you actually do the work and leave it, on your curb, we'll take care of it for you. Those two combined, I found when I worked in Woodside that we got close to a 90%. They knew we were coming back, like you stated. We gave them a mechanism to get rid of the brush that they cut. I mean, we were up to about 90%, and it's probably higher now.
Yeah, the grant program is also helping.
This is Dan with Woodside. Something that worked really well for us too, that Don Bowler did, was go and have a community meetings like a month before their chipping date, and get them excited and showing them what they need to do. And then also going out and do inspections before you come to an area and let them know the chipper program's coming. So we're going to start trying to implement that more to even get more people excited and more people to do the work they need to do instead of just putting material out.
Oh, thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from Mid-Penn, Joshua. He's asking about, do you also incorporate biodiversity goals, protecting native plants and sensitive habitats like removing French broom by hand?
We do, and that was through our partnership with the Ecologically Sound Partnership or practices. They helped us create our best management practices, and we really do focus on the removal of the non-natives, protection of the natives, and also dispelling myths and showing, actual success stories. A lot of people feel that grazing would hurt the reintroduction of native grasses, but we're actually seeing the reverse. Places where grazing has been done appropriately, we're seeing a return of the native grasses where we have removed broom, and we do remove broom both mechanically and by pulling both. But we're seeing the reintroduction of the more herbaceous vegetation that would have been there had the broom not been there. So we definitely are taking that into consideration.
And then a follow-up question on that from Patrick. How are you complying with CEQA on some of your larger non-exempt projects?
And that's where Panorama comes in. They work side by side with our planning and program manager. Her name is Ann Krelock. She's phenomenal. If any of you try to hire her away from me, I will be very, very angry. And she has 2 decades worth of environmental compliance work, and then partnering with Panorama, we go through a very comprehensive notice of exemption. Our notice of exemptions are bordering on mitigated neg decks when it comes to the product that we deliver.
Yeah, and if anybody's interested, check out their website. You can look at their staff and a lot of biologists and environmental degreed personnel that actually you employ there. So that's,
and Sequoia, they partner with Sequoia. So Sequoia does our biological work, and Panorama does the heavier lift.
right. Okay. Let's see. I had a question. So you guys are doing a lot of work, and you've been doing it for a couple of years now. Are your residents seeing any positive impacts because of the authority with insurance companies?
We have helped with renewals or the removal of some non-renewals. Anything large scale, I don't think we've experienced that yet. I think our partnership and beta test that we're doing with IBHS will lead to that grander benefit from insurance companies, decreased costs.
Yeah, and I do know that you guys have had a huge growth in your Firewise communities. And I mean, I'm assuming that's because of the authority and all the work you've been able to do. And because of shout out to Todd Lando and all the great public education he's doing through Fire Safe Marin. But that is now a critical component for insurance companies if people want to be able to maintain their insurance. So how would you say that the Firewise communities, why have you received such a huge growth?
Fire Safe Marin, I'll be blunt. The growth started before the MWPA started, and the continue recertification of our Firewise communities is because of Fire Safe Marin, and they have a half position funded towards working with the Firewise communities to continue with that, the addition of new ones, and then the recertification of the existing.
So they have a part-time employee that's just dedicated to Firewise communities. All right,
Yes.
well, we can follow up with Todd on that.
Rich Shortall, Todd's now with Central Marin Fire, so Rich Shortall is the executive coordinator for Fire Safe Marin now.
Okay. So does the authority have a legal team or, so for our potential issues left to the towns, the cities, and the authority, how do you?
So we have general counsel who is not a CEQA expert, but we also have Remy Moose Manley, who's one of the premier law firms in the CEQA world that is on our team. So we have a robust legal team, but it's scattered across 3 different firms, one for general counsel, one for employment, and then one for CEQA.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I don't see anything. Oh, no, sorry, Ed, I see your question. Ed's interested in hearing just a little bit more about the evacuation risk assessment. has that been completed and is it on your website or is there a presentation in the works for it?
We will be having a presentation to the board at our March meeting, so it'll be the third Thursday of March at 3:00. But we've also had a presentation that's going to be happening right about now with our operations committee this month, and then we had a presentation to our advisory technical committee in January. So if you go to marinwildfire.org, click on record of meetings, you can go into our archives and pull up the January advisory technical committee meeting, or wait for today's meeting of the operations committee to be posted, or wait for our March meeting to see the overall presentation. I came into this ingress egress risk assessment with high expectations, and they are exceeding those high expectations that I had.
Okay. And who did the for you?
It was a team of companies. Snowman Technology is the primary team. Fear and Peers is doing the traffic engineering. Spatial Informatics is doing the wildfire or the fire modeling. And then UC Berkeley is doing our communications modeling.
Okay. Sounds like an A team for sure.
It was top notch.
Yeah, for sure.
Can you mention the name of the you said the traffic portion? What was the name of the company?
Fear and Peers, FEHR, and Peers is PEERS.
Okay, and then what are they exactly doing for you as far as traffic goes? What do you mean by that, I guess?
Actually modeling how the flow of traffic happens. So we're working with the Transportation Authority of Marin. They already have their traffic models.
Yeah.
And then when we say move these people from here to here, they're modeling how it happens along with UC Berkeley.
I like that.
It's
Okay,
amazing.
So Mark, how much time do you have left? Do you have to run or?
I was actually able to get someone to cover my spot at the ops committee. So if you guys have more questions, I'm available.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Well, we really appreciate your time. It's such incredible information. Are you partnering, is Authority partnering with any outside agencies? For example, like PG&E or maybe a water company to do, work or education or anything like that?
So I skipped over this too quick. At our advisory technical committee, and those are our fire prevention engineers that are putting together our projects, we have non-voting seats. And so each of our land management agencies have a non-voting seat. PG&E has a non-voting seat. Fire Safe Marin has a non-voting seat. And that way we could try to coordinate our activities. I don't know if any PG&E folks are in here. Not quite totally successful in coordinating our projects with PG&E at this time, but we have optimism that we'll be able to do that. But where our coordination has been is with our land management agencies. They're well organized in a group called One TAM. And so we're partnering with them. They have a overall forest health strategy, and we're working together to create a regional priority plan so we can access regional fire and regional forest and fire capacity funding. And we're shooting for a block grant to help fund those projects that are in their regional priority plan.
Yeah, PG&E is tough to wrangle, but we've been kind of successful, but that is a tough one. Are you able to purchase any equipment through the authority?
We are, but rather than the authority purchasing the equipment, our member agencies have been purchasing the equipment, and we provide the funding for it. Oh,
interesting. Okay. Brian Kelly has a question about how much did the evacuation assessment project cost?
1.25 million. However, that is if we choose to have them develop a software application that our pre-fire engineers can use. But we have a stopping point of here in a couple of months where we need to decide if we're going to have that software developed. If that software isn't developed, it's going to be about 800,000. And we're likely not to have the software developed and just continue to use STI to do the modeling for us. It turned to be a little bit more complicated than we had hoped. We'd hoped it would be just really easy tool where we could say, hey, if we do this, it'll do that. And then it's not that easy.
Yeah. And doesn't Zonehaven have some modeling capabilities as well?
They do. And actually, Zonehaven is an unpaid partner in that risk assessment. So the reason why they're unpaid is they're going to take the results of our evacuation survey or a risk assessment and put it into Zone Haven.
Okay. Question from Woodside Fire. How long did it take from the first vision to get the 17 stakeholders to agree to the JPA?
In government timeframes, lightning fast. It was actually pretty amazing. It was in mid 2018, it was late 2018, early 2019 that we decided we needed to form the JPA. The JPA was approved in November of 19, and the tax was approved in March of 20. So a year and a half.
Yeah, that is fast. So everybody was on the same page. And are all of those agencies, do they have significant WUI within their jurisdiction?
Every single one of them, yes. And the way Marin County's communities are configured, most homes, if not all, are within 2 miles of the WUI if they're not in the WUI.
Right, yeah. We have a lot less agencies. I want to say probably less than 10. And even though quite a few have significant WUI, there's probably a couple of them that feel that they don't really have no WUI threat. So yeah, we have significantly less, so you would think it would be easier for us. Okay, let's see here. Okay, everybody's really great. We have a great chat going. It's we're posting all the different studies and the websites, so people, and we'll be able to save the chat for everybody. Let's see. You talked about bandwidth and motivation, or you've talked about bandwidth, and I also add, well, bandwidth, and you got to be motivated to put it in your, your bandwidths. Can you give us any insight of how maybe we can motivate, our agencies to think about this? And so, I mean, your model is perfect. It's like, we can serve it on a platter almost.
The motivation actually is internally driven from our member agencies. I think that's how we were able to get this initiative passed to begin with. So I'm lucky. I haven't had to work hard to create that motivation. It was there. I'm now just giving them the resources to leverage that motivation.
Right. I mean,
I guess this, the actual modeling, the scientific presentation of our case is helping make it a more of a factual argument rather than an emotional argument. And I think factual arguments help motivate people a little bit better than emotional arguments, especially people that have decision-making authority within government entities.
right. And maybe the Tubbs fire potentially. I mean, I really love your statistic about the 4-to-1 efficiency rate. I've never really heard anybody break it down into a quantitative number, but that's an excellent, I think that's an excellent thing to put in a grant, that it's 4-to-1.
And that was less than scientific. That was me as the ops section chief for that fire going, hey, that's about how much better this was. And yes, having fires nearby definitely motivated. I remember visiting with the grand jury in 2017 after the North Bay fires that said, that this motivation is going to last 5 years unless we have another fire.
Yeah.
And unfortunately we did.
All right. Well, unless there's, let's see if I can find any more questions in the chat. I'm not seeing anybody. Are there any hands raised? I guess this is a last call for questions. We really appreciate your time. And again, I think we're all just so impressed by what you've done. There's a lot of things in the chat, just people are just kind of blown away. And I want to give another shout out to our friend, Todd Lando. You mentioned him, and it's really great to meet you. And obviously you play a significant role in how this is rolled out and been developed. Your expertise, your career at the fire department, and your commitment obviously has helped make this very, very successful. And then again, $20 million a year probably doesn't.
Doesn't hurt, does it?
Makes your job a little easier. So we'll
And
work.
I just did put my email in the chat if you guys want to reach out. And again, every time I meet with folks like you, if you have any ideas how we can improve our program, I would love to hear it, because that's how we get better. Because like I said, we're not the original people doing this work.
Right. Well, we do share kind of, at least I share with Todd kind of contractors and different pieces of equipment we've used and things like that. So, we'll continue. And if I find anything interesting, now that I have your email, Mark, I'll send it your way. And please do the same. Yeah, we'd love to receive any information and send it out to our membership and to our fire agencies as well.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon, Mark.
All right. Take care.